Hello and welcome to Disc and Dice, episode 21, the first in our new fortnightly format. We're going to see how this goes for a little while, coming at you a bit more frequently. My name is Tim. With me, as always, are my co-hosts JT
Hello.
and Paul.
Hello as well.
And how are we doing, fellas?
Shit.
Care
I'm
to expand or just not
No,
happy
just
about
kidding. I'm great. No, I'm great. I was just seeing what would happen.
well. I'm not doing shit. I'm doing all right.
Well, that's good to hear. It's nice to have balance in the podcast.
Yeah,
I'm
it's good that JT opening things like that will mean that immediately we have to tag this episode as explicit. So that's always
Yep.
good.
Don't listen at work. You will get fired if you listen to this episode at work.
Or
That's a
with children.
guarantee.
Or with children. Don't put this podcast in the ears of your children.
That's right.
Yeah, we never know what JT's going to say next. He started
And
out being
we
the polite one, but he looks like he's trying to break that stereotype. He doesn't want to be typecast.
and
So
we
now,
will call protective services if you play this to your children. We will do it. Right.
be like, that parent is letting me swear at their children, and that's on them.
Exactly.
Well, hey, look, in kind of gaming adjacent news, I'm excited because today I finally got round to buying tickets to PAX, which Paul, you had been nagging me to do for like a solid 8 months now.
Yeah, I think
So
finally is the key word there.
yeah, yeah, it worked. Look, finally, it happened.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, PAX is it's going to be it's about 3 weeks away, I think, maybe 3.5 weeks or something like that. So we
Really
may,
snuck up. That's
yeah,
so
yeah,
quick.
it's real soon. So at least two of the three of us here will be going. So I think
I can't wait to absolutely definitely go to PAX this year.
The annoying thing is, listeners, that like all of us have gone to PAX in the past, and a couple of us multiple times, but we've never managed to all three of us go on the same trip.
hmm
Like a couple of years ago, like Paul and I have both been individually, and then we finally went together 2 years ago, and we were trying to get JT to come, and he was like maybe, and then couldn't. And then last year, when JT led the charge, getting us all booked on flights and accommodation, and he was really the mum of that trip. Paul decided to go to Russia.
yep, let the
Um,
team down.
To spite everyone. It wasn't to do with the university or anything. It was absolutely to spite everybody.
commie bastard. And now that Paul is coming back from Russia for this PAX, JT's decided he'd rather go to the Gold Coast and go to theme parks.
I wish that were true, but the fact is that I was denied. So yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
going.
it's probably Let's if we're being honest, we'll say JT was not allowed to go to PAX, but hopefully
Mum
for
said I couldn't.
exactly. But maybe for next year we can get the whole crew together. Either way, though, yeah, PAX is coming in a few weeks, and we're still thinking about what we'll do in terms of the podcast. But we may do a little bit of a PAX special. I think we'll have to see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what we've got to talk
Uh,
about. But yeah,
another installment of our expansion series, maybe.
possibly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll keep you posted about that. But
If
that's
there's
that's
anything that people think we should definitely check out at PAX, by the way, like if there's anything in particular you want to hear about and you can't get there yourself, hit
Cosplay
us
girls.
up and we'll make sure we check it out and report back.
exactly. But that's a few weeks in the future, and
Hmm.
we've gathered here today to talk about what we've been playing in the past. So, JT, you have been playing a game that you have said you are going to play for a few episodes now, which is called Kenshi.
Kenshi. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start because I was really excited about this game. I don't really remember where I saw it. It might have been on a Reddit thread, people recommending not so well-known games. And Kenshi came up as this sort of sandbox experience, and that's kind of what I got from that. But the problem is that it's just it really is a grind. You can do a lot of stuff. It sort of it sells you on, its Steam page about all the different things you can do, squad-based gameplay. However, really about grinding away you would in a traditional MMO to increase your stats to the point where you can really do anything meaningful in the game. And I'm talking hours of gameplay and in-game daytime even on fast forward settings, because you can do that, just to get to a level where you can go on missions to, acquire goods and things like that. I guess at this point, I'm already not playing it. I've probably put in about 15 or 20 hours of gameplay, which I've been told is not enough. Sort of learned that wasn't enough to really do anything good in the game. It became a bit of a chore. I really love certain aspects of the game, like the setting. I guess it's implied that it's like a destroyed or post-apocalyptic world, but there's no real technology like mechs or guns or anything. Everything's like bladed weapons, or there's a lot of fighting factions and things. But it just didn't go about it the way that I thought. Being said, it's overwhelmingly positively received on Steam. A lot of people really love the fact that you have to grind so much to get good at the game or to be able to do things in it, because you really do start out as someone is just less than a human. You're there. So that's kind of my issue with the game at the moment.
I have a question actually. I have no idea what this game is. Like I don't understand like what kind of game it is. So is this like you said it's kind of like an MMO? Is this like so is it like
But
an
you said
RP?
it was also a sandbox.
Yeah,
Sandbox,
This,
you have to
yeah,
grind in.
is it
What's the
like
story? What
is
is
it
the concept here?
hang on, is it like an RPG? Like what's the genre of this game? I'm a bit confused.
oh, okay. So it's an RPG. It's a free roaming squad based RPG.
Right.
I'll give you the synopsis or what the Steam store says. A free roaming squad based RPG focusing on open ended sandbox gameplay features rather than a linear story. Be a trader, a thief, a rebel, a warlord, an adventurer, a farmer, a slave, or just food for the cannibals. Research new equipment and craft new gear. Other than that, that's really it. There is no.
So it sounds like an MMO.
Yes,
That's
but
what
it
it
is single
sounds like.
player.
Oh, but it's single player.
It's
Okay.
single player.
All right. Okay.
So,
Um,
so,
and
so when you say
there's
squad based, then
Yeah, who's
does
in your
that
squad?
mean does that mean it's like JRPGs where you have like 4 people in your little team and you
not.
control all of them, or is it still other players make up that squad with you?
No, it's like I said, it is single player. You can encounter NPCs who can join your team, and you can have. I think there isn't actually a limit on how many people can join the squad. It can essentially be an army, and you can have people, stay at base researching things for you, or send other ones out on missions. Make a trade caravan and do some of the work for you. And a lot of those things really are up to the player on how they want to go about making their own story. And that's something that they say that you are making these little situations and they turn into adventures and then turn into stories. But the problem is that I really didn't get any of that in the first 20 hours of gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And if it takes me more than 20 hours to really see what the game is meant to be about, to me, that's probably too much.
Yeah, I've never
That's why I've already backed off from it.
I've never liked that. Like to be honest, I have to say I hear this a lot about JRPGs. I've said before on the podcast I am not a big JRPG person, so possibly I'm not heaps informed about this, but I hear a lot about JRPGs that kind of like, oh, it gets really great after about 20 hours kind of comment, and I can't imagine doing that. I can't imagine playing a game that's not fun for 20 hours before I get there. What I wanted to ask you, JT, was what did you do? Because like you say, it sounds like open sandbox. You can do whatever you want. Like in the time that you did play, like what direction did you go in terms of your character?
So I started out as just an adventurer, and I guess the point of the game is also start out with any preconceived or pre-made. You're just a person with low stats, and you need to train absolutely everything to a point to where you could say that you're a trader. I started out and find some missions, but it's really not that clear on even that. There's no real funnels you into doing things. And so I really was quite lost in what my character was doing. I didn't really see those situations arise. I think I saw some battles off in the distance that I tried to join, and then just got my ass handed to me because my character was such. And that's sort of really where I kind of stopped. I didn't feel like I had really gained anything in those 20 hours that I played the game. To answer your question, I really don't think I got much out of it in that regard. I didn't really go anywhere. I didn't really
Oh,
have a little story. I didn't really list from it. And at the end of the day, what I ended up doing is started looking at guides, and that to me straight away took me out of that adventure state. And I just felt like I was playing any other RPG at that point.
well, see, to me specifically, that doesn't sound like other RPGs. I was going to mention this before when Paul brought up the JRPG things, and that it gets really good after 20 hours or so. And because, like, traditionally a JRPG is like what? They're like 80 hours. Like, they tend to make them really long. But I feel like a staple of that particular genre is the fact that they have really in-depth storylines. And so when someone says it gets really good after about 20 hours, that's not to say that it wasn't fun before that. It's just, that's maybe act two isn't until you've played 20 hours. And so, like, stories start combining and stuff comes back. So I can kind of understand where people are coming from. I can also understand somebody feeling hesitant when they've been told it's not going to get to as good as it gets until you've already been playing for 20 hours, right? But
Right, no,
then if
that's a good point. That it's like
yeah,
it's not that it goes from bad to good. It goes from good to better.
yeah, but then I guess like that also doesn't sound like necessarily what JT you've been describing, because like it sounds like a lot of RPGs these days are also open world or sandbox, and Kenshi is coming down much harder on the sandbox side of that balance than the RPG. So it is role playing, I guess, because you're managing the stats of your character. But when I think of RPGs, I think of stuff like The Witcher, which has a very strong narrative thread running throughout. And is that what's missing from Kenshi? Like the reason to do things?
Yeah, I think the real problem with Kenshi is that it doesn't give you something to go into the game with. There's no expectation of you whatsoever. And that, for me, the problem. I think in games like The Witcher, or even in an MMO like WoW or Lord of the Rings Online, anything like that, that little loose part of character story is really what the world really, really well. And when that's not there, you do feel genuinely a bit lost. There are so many forum posts on Kenshi simply from people asking about how do I start this game? What do I do first?
Yeah,
And
wow.
to me tells me that perhaps the developer is their ultimate sandbox fantasy that they made. It might be a bit out of touch with what most people want. If anyone out there has played the game and they think I'm doing it wrong, I'm all ears. Please tell me what to do. I'm all ears.
Okay, so the other thing that I was interested in was the setting, which you mentioned briefly before, and you said it was kind of like it sounded like it's a destroyed Earth or post-apocalyptic, maybe something like that. Like, what's like the setting and the premise for the game?
There's not a lot that they really give you about the setting, other than it's a big desert open world landscape. Looks like destroyed Earth, I guess. That's all I can really tell you. It's definitely just post-apocalyptic, but with a little bit of a spin on like salvaged technology, salvaged pieces of building, weapons. There's no vehicles. That's the best description I can give.
Mm-hmm.
It's very desert. It's very desert-like setting.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, to be honest, I can't say I'm feeling the urge to play it.
It looks great on paper, it really does. But after spending those 20 hours with it, it just didn't really give me what I thought it was going to.
Yeah,
Is
fair
the
enough.
best way I can explain it.
20 hours is a lot as well. Like 20 hours is enough. Like we talked last week about, or last episode about Thronebreaker. I gave that like 10, and I felt like 10 hours is enough in like a big game for me to know whether I should continue. So I feel like 20 hours is absolutely enough for you, you know? Like
Yeah.
if you're not getting it after 20 hours, like you shouldn't have to push further than that.
Yeah, that's basically what I got from it as well. So again, if anyone thinks that I could be playing it better or in a different way, I'm all ears. But for now, I'm going to put it down. I won't uninstall it, but I will put it down.
It's on a timeout.
It's on a timeout.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to get in touch and tell JT how to get good at Kenshi, they can contact us, discanddice@gmail.com. But apart from that, we are not just talking about the discs, but also the dice. And Timmy, I think you have been playing some tabletop games.
Absolutely. So I was interstate visiting my girlfriend between last episode and this one, and I brought a few games with me this time for us to try out. So first of all, just off top, I mentioned Keyforge because we were speaking about that just last episode. So I got back into that, which I was very glad to. I kind of got the itch to play from talking about it with you guys, and so decided to pack it then and there. We said all we have to say about that game last week. Shayla loved it because she beat me straight away, so she was quite chuffed with herself.
The evidence is on Instagram, for those who are wondering.
Straight away, she was smack talking Paul because when Paul and I played, I just happened to beat him pretty much every time we played. Still a really fun game, even when you lose. So she's feeling like top dog at the moment. So I think we're gonna have to do something about that. But yeah, we'll see. The other one I wanted to chat about, in particular, was a game called Elder Sign, which is a Fantasy Flight game designed by the same guys who did the original Arkham Horror, but it's a much smaller game. So, for anyone not familiar with the Lovecraft suite of games from Fantasy Flight, Arkham Horror, Mansions of Madness, both of which now have multiple editions, which have changed substantially, and then Eldritch Horror. But really early days, pretty much when there was only the Call of Cthulhu card game and Arkham Horror, there was also a game called Elder Sign, which is a lot smaller. It doesn't have a big board. It's kind of all card based, but they're big cards, and it's all cooperative. The idea is that you are in a museum or a university. I'm pretty sure it's a museum because there's a curator, and you are essentially trying to stop Lovecraftian horror, and it's dice based. So you choose a card you want to solve, and it has objectives you have to satisfy, and you do that by rolling certain things in certain orders. You have cards, which are items, which allow you to add different dice to your dice pool and stuff like that. The appeal of this game is that it is cooperative and you're all working together, but the odds are stacked against you so hard. It's ludicrously difficult and stressful. Kind of think like the same way Pandemic is fun. You know how like that disease is just constantly getting away from you, and every time you get a small win and you think, all right, we're back on track, then some random thing happens and all of a sudden you're on the back foot again. This is similar in that essentially you're trying to solve these mysteries and these things that are going on to stop the ancient evil one from waking up. And if they wake up, then you have a battle that you are most likely not going to win on your hands. So the best way to win is to stop them waking up, but that is very tricky. And you have like a clock that every time you have a turn, you move the clock ahead. Once it gets back around to 12, a new card comes out, and that is called a Mythos card. And so that lasts for the next day, and it might be like every time a monster comes out, this time something worse happens, or you can no longer use spell cards for this day, etc., etc.
How is it different to the kind of the stuff you mentioned, like Mansions or Arkham Horror and things like that? Like, is there something that sets this one apart from those?
Yeah, so it is so much quicker. So
Right. Okay.
Arkham Horror is Arkham Horror is a massive board that you need to move around and close gates and defeat monsters, and there's stuff happening on all these different parts of the boards, and it also takes time to move around. This one you have and you can just move to any of them on your turn. You just go, I'm just going to try and solve that one, and you're there. Moving isn't a thing in this. You just move to wherever you want to be, and you just roll. And because like the ancient one is just a card with a doom track, and that's always going up. Whereas Arkham Horror, you could be playing for, you're not going to play for less than 2, and you're probably going to play for at least 3. And if you're playing with the full 8 players, you can be playing for 6, 7, 8 hours. This one you might play for a couple of hours. We played one game that went for a couple, and then the next game was done in an hour because the game just kicks your ass sometimes. But it was fun because, like I said, this game is stacked against you and it's really hard. The first game we played, we actually cleaned up. We got really lucky. We stopped the ancient one from waking up. We had a whole bunch of success, and we felt like, oh, all right, we got the hang of this. Now we can play and we'll be better. We just got way too cocky, and the next time we played, we just got our asses absolutely handed to us.
I feel like having a similar experience in Pandemic to something like that.
Mhm.
Like maybe
Yeah.
not winning the very first time, but I've had games of Pandemic where it's just a breeze. Where
Mm.
like everything goes right. The disease never like what's it called, like outbreaks or whatever. You never get
Yeah.
outbreaks in places that chain with other outbreaks, and you just kind of like you just cruise around and clean up the disease and you're done. And then I've had just games of Pandemic where you don't even cure one disease and you're just
Mhm.
absolutely destroyed from the start, which
Yeah.
is kind of fun. Like that's part of the fun of it, I guess. That it's not the kind of game where like a Pandemic, I guess, is not the kind of game where I don't feel anyway that you kind of figure it out and then every time you win, that there's enough randomness to it that you can get caught
Yeah.
out, which is part of what makes it enjoyable and replayable.
Yeah. And just to go back to your question as well, the other thing that makes the Elder Sign different is that it's good with only a small amount of players. I've actually played it a lot on my own. As depressing as that may sound to some people, you can play it's 1 to 8 players, so you can play it on your own. And I've done that a bunch of times, and it was actually great with 2 people. Like Shayla and I felt like we had like a real good rhythm going, and because you need strategy, right? And so the less people, the easier it is to everybody be across what the goal is, sort of thing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, like it's an older one now, and those games have kind of gotten better and better, and they've never done a new version of this. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to want to rush out and buy Elder Sign. You can get it as a mobile app now as well, so maybe you want to try it out that way. But yeah, that one's really good fun, especially if you're into the Lovecraft mythos like I am.
Hmm.
The other game I wanted to talk about, though, unless you guys had any other questions about that before I run away.
I'm all good.
Go
Go
on.
into your next one.
Good stuff. So, um, I got a new game on this trip, and it's called Villainous, and it's by Disney. And the concept of this game is that everybody is playing as a classic Disney villain. So you might choose to play as Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, or Ursula from The Little Mermaid, Jafar, Captain Hook, um, Prince John from Robin Hood.
Kylo Ren.
Uh, I would be
Thanos.
surprised.
Jar Jar?
That's true. That's true. You just play as like Kevin Feige. Just yeah. um,
Yeah, that's the real Disney villain.
uh, yeah, play as Sony. But yeah, so this is a cool game. I did a fair bit of research on this one because Shayla mentioned like a while ago that she was interested in it, and I always like to like look into games before I buy them because good big board games are like kind of starting at $80 these days. They can be really expensive, so I kind of like to read reviews and see what people are saying
Yeah, my
before I commit.
my version of doing that is letting you buy it first,
Yeah,
It's worked
yeah.
really well for me so far, I've got to say.
I'm what's known in the business as a sucker. Um, so so no, I looked this one up, and a lot of people kind of said, this game's fun, but like the instructions aren't very clear, and you kind of have to play a bunch of times to work it out. And they also said it's not very good with only two people because you kind of need at least three, and four is best. And it's too tricky and rah rah rah. But I feel like I didn't have any of those experiences, and so I just wanted to say that up top because I read that everywhere, and I feel like perhaps because this is a Disney product, a lot of people who are not familiar with complex board games have picked it up, or people who have felt that this is going to be a family game, again, because it's Disney, have picked it up. I don't think it's particularly difficult, but I can understand people unfamiliar with board games outside of your Scrabbles and Monopolies and that kind of stuff might have a steep learning curve. Because the concept is thus everybody is playing as a different villain, and they are working to achieve their objective. For Maleficent, it is on my board. Everyone has their own little board with four locations on it. I need to have a curse at every location at the start of my turn, and if I achieve that, I win. For Ursula, she needed to get the trident off of King Triton and also his crown and have them back at her headquarters, her cave, I think, at the start of her turn. Captain Hook needs to defeat Peter Pan. I think Jafar needs to have the lamp, stuff like that. So every individual player is playing with their own deck of cards and their own board, but they are able to interfere with their opponent's boards.
That
So
sounds
you are
very
kind of
interesting.
you're kind of playing your own game and you're trying to do your own thing there, but then depending on where you are on your board, because each location has different abilities, if you're on one that lets you use what they call fate, you take two cards from your targeted opponent's fate deck and play them where you think it's most going to mess up them. Because the fate deck has all of the villains kind of like heroes. So if I'm playing as Captain Hook and someone decides they're going to use their fate ability on me, they'll pull two cards from my deck, and it might be like, one of the Lost Boys or Tinkerbell or Peter Pan, and they can say, I'm going to put Peter Pan on this location on your board because that blocks off you being able to use some of your abilities and makes it more difficult for you to achieve your objective. And so then on my next turn, I can do the same thing potentially. I can mess with someone else's board, or I can attempt to get rid of the hero, Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, whoever they put down on my board, or I can ignore that for now and just keep carrying on trying to do my own objective. And so I can understand how that could be a bit tricky to wrap your head around if you were thinking we were going to be playing a game where we're all on the same board and we're just rolling a dice and moving around and doing whatever. But I had heaps of fun with this, and my number one piece of advice for it is to just push through with that first game. It's one of those games where, of course, you have to read the instructions, but it's going to make a whole bunch more sense when you start doing it. And they give every character has their own little booklet which has tips for how to play that character, which is really important as well. For the first few turns, Shayla and I were kind of going, "What are we doing? I guess I'll do this. I can do that, so I'm going to do it and see what happens later on down the track." And then there was this point, almost at exactly the same time for both of us, just from pulling cards and kind of reading the cards that were coming out for our individual characters, where we both went, oh, that's how I can do that thing that it's been telling me I should be trying to do. And all of a sudden, we both got really cocky and started playing. And then it came down to like, I won with like if she had had one more turn, she would have won kind of thing.
Hmm.
And we were very keen to play again straight away. Um, and that was just with two players. And I feel like when you've got three or four and you're kind of seeing how everything's working, it'd be quite a dynamic game. And the kind of game where you can be like, I'm going to play very quietly and mind my own business and see if I can get my objective three quarters done before anybody notices what's going on. Or you might be the kind of person that's like, I'm going to be messing with everybody else to make a point. Like there's going to be a bit of strategy in there. and not just because you have to change how you play with each character.
So it kind of sounds like you have to be watching how everyone else is playing on their board while you are playing on yours as well, which, I imagine could be difficult.
You're still playing in turns, so it's not like I'm playing away doing my thing, and my opponents are playing doing their thing. You still watch someone have their turn, and it goes around like in clockwise or however you want to do it. But yes, you absolutely have to be keeping an eye, because the reason I managed to win is because Shayla was getting very smug, very confident that she was going to win, and so I was, for appearance's sake, acting like I was trying to prevent her from doing things. I was acting like I was on the back foot, and I was just quietly achieving my objective at the same time.
Little bit of deception.
Yeah, there's a little bit of it, like how much of a song and dance you want to make, because I could have started doing more and tried to distract her from achieving her objective by making her realize she has to concentrate on me. And then that might have still worked in my favor, because she wouldn't have been achieving her objective, and maybe I could combat what she was trying to do to my board. But I went with this way, and I'm sure different characters would lean into the different kind of play styles there. So they've already got expansions out that I'm keen. Like there's an expansion that has like Scar from the Lion King and Hades from Hercules.
The Riders of the Last Jedi. Disclaimer though, that is absolutely not the opinion of this podcast. Section. Yeah, exactly. They're in the Heroes podcast, Heroes section.
Write in to our Gmail or Twitter about why The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars movie, and we'll tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah, we feed on that kind of hate.
Is it because Episode 2 exists?
I guess the other thing I was going to ask Timmy.
Bigger fish.
The other thing I was going to ask Timmy was: is it feasible when you play it to just focus on your own board, or do you really have to be? You have to be interfering with the other person or the other players?
I mean, I've only played one full game.
Right. Okay.
I think it is possible. You could do that. Like, people are going to mess with your board, so you will have to do that. Like, you'll have to deal with them doing that to you, regardless of whether you're just concentrating on yourself or not. Your board will be affected by outside interference. But I don't think you necessarily have to be attacking anybody else. It's one of those games where, you know, on your turn, you take some tokens, which are like the currency that lets you do things, and you spend them to place cards or use abilities. From my experience, it generally doesn't cost anything to do the Fate ability, which is messing with the other boards. So sometimes it feels like wasted opportunity if you chose not to. But there's nothing that says you have to, and I suppose, you know, played the right way, you could absolutely just concentrate on yourself.
So 2 thumbs up from Timmy?
Yeah, that one gets both of these thumbs right up there. So, but yeah, that's pretty much. I've not been doing much in the way of video games this fortnight. It was all board games for me. A little bit of Destiny, but you guys have heard about that. But Paul, we haven't heard from you yet. What's been doing?
Yeah, Uncle Paul, tell us.
Well, embarrassingly enough, I am going to have to eat my words on the podcast here, because a few episodes ago I talked about how I played the WoW Classic beta and I really didn't enjoy it, and it was super grindy and everything took ages, and I was absolutely sure that I had no interest at all in trying WoW Classic when it was released. And so a couple of weeks ago, WoW Classic was released, and that's been basically all that I've been playing. I got drawn back into it, I have to say, by some friends who jumped back in as well. And I wasn't going to give it a go because I hadn't enjoyed the beta, and they said they were having heaps of fun, and that was basically all I needed to just go back in and give it a little go. And I've been absolutely sucked back into that. So for anyone who is not aware of this, this is WoW as it was when it was released, God, I don't know, like over 15 years ago. Whenever WoW first came out, it is WoW as it was back then, warts and all, which is something that I'll get to a little bit later. But yeah, they've kind of re-released this for nostalgia, also for money, obviously. And yeah, I guess very broadly speaking, I am really enjoying it.
Can I ask, is it do you think Blizzard have taken on a lot of feedback through the beta period and improved it based on what you played, or is it because now you've got all those friends in there that are playing it? Suddenly, you've got that kind of the squad and the what you initially loved WoW for that, like you're playing with your friends again, or is it a combination? Like, what's different now that you've gone back?
Right, I think it's a couple of things. Firstly, they haven't changed anything because that's kind of the point. It's like it is WoW as it was back then, and the beta was the same, and even the stuff that is bad, they are not changing. Like everything is exactly as it was.
I think for me, when I was playing WoW, and maybe this is sort of what's coming back to you as you're playing it again, is there, when you're playing with your friends, there's a great, and it's a massive sense of, and I love using this word, a really great sense of camaraderie. And and that's something that I got from WoW, and I think that's what made me continue to play it at the time, was not necessarily for the game mechanics, but that I was doing these things in a big world, but with other people. And that sounds like that's sort of what pulled you back in, is having someone to do those things with. I guess you're kind of experiencing with other people. Probably helps that you've done all that before.
Yeah, that's one big part of it. I think like to sort of get back to Timmy's question. I think you're right, JT. That one big part of it is that I'm playing with people. The other big part of it, I think, is that I played a warrior in the beta, and I just think in WoW Classic Warrior is kind of boring. Like you don't have a lot of interesting abilities. It's really grindy. Whereas I'm playing as a priest in like proper WoW Classic now that it's out, and I'm just having a lot more fun with that. Like being a spellcaster, having a few of the more interesting abilities that a priest has, being able to heal to help other people. That's just more fun than what I was doing in the beta. So they haven't changed it, but I've just kind of I'm playing a different class, which makes a big difference. And yeah, I have friends to play with, which I think is a massive part of it. And one of the big things there, I think, is that they have taken out so much of the automated stuff of retail WoW, which is that's what everyone's now calling normal WoW, is retail WoW. That they've taken out the group finder. So there was basically a thing in the game which, if you wanted to do any group content, it would find you people to do it with. It would put you in a group. It would teleport you to the place to do it, and then you just have to do it. That's all gone. So if you want to do any group content, you have to run to the area. You have to type in the chat windows. You have to ask people if they're looking to do this stuff as well. Then you have to form the groups yourselves. You all have to travel to where you need to do the content. And the content is also much more difficult, in line with how it was when WoW first came out. So retail WoW, everything is very streamlined, and the game is, like, for better or for worse, I think there are positives to this. Retail WoW, you can basically play it as a single player game. Everything is kind of organized so that you can do it on your own. Original WoW wasn't like that. I should add as well, I did play towards the end of the first years of vanilla WoW, right before the first expansion came out. And back then it was a lot more difficult. So you can do questing by yourself, but anything more than that, you had to have other people to do it. And because they've taken away all those automated systems, if you want to do that content, you have to communicate with people. And I think this is probably the best thing about WoW Classic. I feel like there's a bit of nostalgia going around where people are saying like, oh, the community playing WoW Classic is so much better than the community playing retail WoW. To be honest, I think that's probably kind of bullshit. I think it's the exact same people who are playing it. It's just that the game forces you to communicate, and it incentivizes not being a dick, basically.
Can you foresee that becoming less popular because as people want to just get things done in the future and seeing like things revert back to a streamlined way. Can you see that maybe happening?
Do you think that WoW Classic will have those streamlined things added in?
Or not added in, but will people begin to perhaps complain about it as they want to experience the content quicker? Or do you think they might just jump ship and go back to retail WoW if they want that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will drop off eventually because I think the the kind of appeal of it being nostalgic and it being like it was before and it being sort of more difficult and everything's a bit slower, I think that appeal will wear off. Like even for me, I think at some point I will be like, all right, I've got everything I need from this. I'm done. But I don't know. I don't think that people will necessarily demand that stuff because I think there is retail WoW they can just go to play if they want that stuff. But it's hard to predict how this will go. At the moment, it's like massive. It's blowing up. Like it's super popular. Heaps of people are playing it. It will be interesting to see in 6 months how big the community is because having done a little bit of endgame stuff with original WoW, like WoW's original endgame is super grindy. If you want to do raids or anything like that, for example, in retail WoW, you can use the group finder to find a group to do a raid, and you can be in and out in half an hour and have killed a bunch of bosses. If you want to do raiding in WoW Classic, the minimum group size is 40, which again you have to organize yourself, and you are never in there for less than 2 or 3 hours when you're going in and doing raiding. So it's the kind of thing that you need a lot of time. You really need to organize yourself to do. I think probably a lot of people, myself included, will drop off at that point because I've kind of got no interest in playing WoW at that level again. Not like a few years ago. I don't have the time to do that anymore. But to talk about how it is now anyway, because I'm not at that point yet, one of the things I also really like is that the scales, or just the scale and the stakes of the game have been brought all the way down again. So WoW got to the point where every expansion you basically were saving the world from some apocalyptic threat because that's the level it had got to. You know, they couldn't dial it back. It's kind of nice now that you're back to sort of being a nobody and you're doing kind of menial quests for NPCs around the world. And it means that it feels a bit more like an RPG. Like you feel like you began as a nobody and you are leveling up and getting stronger and the challenges you face are getting more powerful. Whereas, yeah, in retail WoW, it got to the point where every expansion you basically began as a god every time.
So do you feel that you're engaging with the Warcraft lore a little bit more now?
Maybe a little bit. Like, I don't love the Warcraft lore, to be honest. I think in terms of fantasy settings, I think it's one of my least favorite.
It's very general.
It's very very generic. I think. Like I think if I'm going to get into a kind of generic fantasy lore, I'd rather something like Lord of the Rings or even Warhammer Fantasy, I think is more interesting than Warcraft World. But what I will say I'm doing is I'm really taking my time a lot more because in retail WoW and in lots of MMOs these days, I think we talked about this a bit last week, endgame is kind of where everything happens. So when people play an MMO, you just rush to the end game because that's where the content is. This isn't really like that, partly because it takes so long to level and everything takes so much longer to do, but also partially because that's how WoW Classic was, that the leveling experience was, it kind of was the game. And that's been really enjoyable actually to play it like that again. So not to play it thinking, all right, I have to get to level 60 as fast as possible to start doing these things. It's like I'm just taking my time and I'm spending like a whole night if I want to just leveling up my fishing or something like that, or going around getting wool so I can make new bags for my character so I can carry more things. And all that kind of like insignificant small stuff is not just interesting again, but it's useful again because the game has been scaled all the way back to how it was originally. So gold is valuable. WoW had also got to the point where everyone had tens of thousands of gold and it kind of meant nothing. Now, like at early levels, having 1 gold is a massive deal. So if you've got some item you can make that sells for 50 silver, then it's worth spending a night going around farming so you can make a bunch of that. Because if you've got 5 gold, like there are so many things you can do with 5 gold, and that's really cool as well. It makes crafting matter in a way that it hasn't for a long time in WoW. Powerful items are rare again, which is also really cool. Like I can tell you, not that I will now, but I can remember exactly what the 2 epics that I had in original WoW were and exactly where I got them, like over 10 years ago. And since then, in every WoW expansion, you get 200 epics over the course of it. And epics are the highest level item you can get. But in original WoW, if you got an epic, it was like a big deal, and you remembered that. And it's kind of back to that again. It's like rare gear is rare, and it feels special, which is really cool.
Do you still call epics Professor Plums?
You saying that now is the first time I have remembered that we used to call epics Professor Plums, and so I'm going to try and bring that back into the lingo of WoW.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Do you think that is kind of indicative of how MMOs in general have gone? Like with, how you were saying epics used to be a real reward for like a long slog. And maybe they weren't, maybe, but they were just few and far between. So it felt like an achievement when you got them. And now, trying to keep a ever-growing fan base engaged or get new players to stick around past, the latest expansion or whatever has meant, flooding it with all of these epics and making it so that you look great and you feel like a badass, and specific raids and stuff designed to, with the promise of you'll get some epic gear or whatever. Is that just where MMOs have gone now in general, or is that just how WoW's gone? Do you think?
No, I think in general that is outside of a handful of MMOs. I think that's absolutely where they are. I think it's kind of like it's kind of gaming in general in a way, like a bit of kind of instant gratification type thing. Maybe it's bigger than gaming even. Maybe it's a broader cultural thing. Um, yeah, I think that's definitely sort of where it's at. That you know people want everything quickly, and yeah, they want a lot of epics. Like for example, I think if there had been a game that just came out that was not called WoW Classic, which had all of the systems that WoW Classic has, I think it would be absolutely panned by critics, and everyone would be talking about how terrible it is. I think that,
They'd all be talking about it like JT just talked about Kenshi. It's
yeah,
just too grindy, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not getting anything, and I just have to go to message boards.
right. Like, for example, one thing is there is so much backtracking in WoW Classic. Like the fast travel system in WoW, you have flight paths, so you can fly between each zone. In Classic WoW, there is one flight path in each zone. Some zones take you 10 minutes to run across. And if the flight path happens to be on the far eastern side and you need to be on the far western side, that means every time you want to go to the place you need to go, you got at least 10 minutes travel time. If that's in a modern game, I think people are tearing it to shreds for that kind of thing, and for the fact that you regularly get a quest which will, in that instance, will send you to the place 10 minutes away, and the quest there will tell you to walk back to the place you just were, and then the next quest there will send you back to the place you were originally. So you've got half an hour of nothing but running, and that's what the quests are. And I think it only gets away with it because it's WoW Classic. It only gets away with it because there's a nostalgia there. So yeah, I do think that like where we're at with modern MMOs is that they're not like this, and I guess that is part of the appeal. But I don't know. I think it will wear off, I'd have to say. But I have had some really good experiences. Like I wanted to kind of mention some of these things that just never would happen in retail WoW because the game is so streamlined and so automated that you basically don't ever need to talk to a person while you're playing it. I was questing in one zone, and like I said, I'm playing a priest, so I use wands. And I had a random guy come up to me and ask me if I wanted to buy a wand because he was making them. And it just wouldn't happen in retail WoW because the game would have given you a really powerful wand right at the start. So you wouldn't need to worry about it. But I didn't have a good wand. And this guy had like the crafting professions to make a good one. So he saw I was a priest, and so then he asked me if I wanted to buy one of his wands, and I bought it from him, and it was a massive upgrade for me. And then the other night when I was fishing in one of the zones, one of the fish that I was catching is used by alchemists to make some useful potion. And I had a guy just run up to me and say, like, oh, do you fish up a lot of these? And I was like, yeah, I'm just kind of leveling my fishing here, so I've got quite a few. He was like, all right, well, add me to your friend list and I'll buy everything that you fish up of these because I need them for alchemy. And again, it's like that wouldn't happen in retail WoW because that whole process would be streamlined and the communication would be taken out of it because there'd be some system there in the game. Either they just say that you don't need someone to get the fish for this because it takes too long. Whereas the way it works in WoW Classic is all of the professions kind of link together. So if you want to do alchemy, you need the fish that someone catches from doing fishing. And it made it worthwhile for someone to kind of form a connection and build a relationship there to say, I will buy those fish you're catching because I need them for something I'm doing. And that's, to me, that's just like, that's super cool.
See, that feels so much more like an online world than like
Right.
what modern MMOs have become. Because now it's like everybody wants the opportunity to get the really good thing, and nobody wants to be dependent on other people. So the games are all designed, whereas like maybe you have to get a little team together to go and do like a raid or a strike or a mission or a quest, whatever your particular game calls it. But you're doing it for the loot drop, which you can get, right? It's never
Mhm.
like I have to make friends with somebody that I legitimately don't know because they have what I need and I have to barter with them to get that. And that sounds really, really cool to me. Like I would love to see more of that in modern MMOs.
Yeah, like I think that kind of thing that you were saying about people just grouping together because you know, they want like the best items or something like that. I think it's like this is kind of what I was saying before when I said there's kind of a lot of nostalgia around people talking about the community and saying that like, oh, the WoW Classic community is so good. Like I think what it is that it incentivizes you to be social with people and to do it in a good way because you need to group with people to get things done. And if you form a permanent community, so basically if you make a guild and play with the same people, things are easier, right? Because you can rely on those people to play well, to not screw you over, all that kind of stuff. But you can't join a guild if you're a dick to everyone because everyone will kick you out of their guild. So it incentivizes good behavior basically so that you can get to the best stuff in the game. Like it doesn't incentivize being a dick and just going out for yourself, which is
And
great.
would it be safe to say that what it does is it encourages the social aspect of it to remain in game as opposed to just having like a group chat or a Discord thing and just like talking smack with your mates outside of the game or going to message boards to find out how to do stuff. It keeps it talking to other players you find in games or joining a guild with people that you don't necessarily know in real life because they're that's the support system you need.
It definitely does, I think. Like the game doesn't have voice chat. Not that I know of. I don't think the game has voice chat in it. So if you want to voice chat, you have to use something like Discord to do that. But um, a lot of that stuff you really have to do in game. So you have to group up in game to do group content. You have to join a guild in game if you want to like connect with people like that. Um, and like Retail WoW had a lot of features where if you had people on your friends list and they were on different servers and things like that, you could just group up and play with them no matter what. So they basically took away all the restrictions to playing with people, which I think is actually a positive in the end. Like, you want people to play together, so don't stop them from doing that. But WoW
Mm.
Classic doesn't have that. But there is a positive to that because it means that you have to find a community on your server who you want to play with. You can't just kind of like play with the couple of people who are on your friends list. Like if you want to do big stuff, you've got to find those people and group up with them. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm enjoying it now. I don't think I will enjoy it forever. Like I said, there are a lot of things which are still a bit annoying about it, like backtracking, travel time. The difficulty can be a bit much sometimes. Like you die quite a lot, and and I think once you get to endgame, it does become super grindy. I think it will be interesting to see how long it holds my attention and what Blizzard do with it. But yeah, for now, I'm really enjoying it. Um, and yeah, I guess we'll see where it goes. In terms of MMOs, though, I'm not the only one who has been playing an older MMO that I used to play in the past. Because JT, you have been doing this as well.
Yes. So, just to go back a little bit, last episode, I mentioned that I would be picking up Knights of the Old Republic and having a go with that, which is an older BioWare RPG, single player. So I did start playing that briefly. However, it's pretty dated now, and it wasn't really scratching the Star Wars itch that I really, really wanted. So I actually ended up going back into the Old Republic, which is I guess you can call it Star Wars WoW. I mean, that's a pretty fair statement, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think so, basically.
Yeah, basically. And yeah, I've actually been really enjoying jumping back into that. I've started from scratch. I didn't go back to my old character. And that's another MMO that, even though its user base has sort of dropped down a bit, really significantly since it came out, I think in 2014, 2013, maybe even before
Oh,
that.
I think before that. I think it's old. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
But it does, yeah, it's got a, even though it's changed to free to play model now, with the option of subscribing and obviously additional purchases. But I'm really thinking that it's a good way to go for me in terms of scratching my MMO itch once again. It's been a long time, and I think it gets a lot of things right, and it's continued to get a lot of things right, even though it's had a few overhauls. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it at the moment.
Yeah, I've jumped back into Old Republic after every new Star Wars movie that has been released since Disney took that over, because I kind of get that Star Wars itch, and Old Republic is a really good way to scratch that. And I guess we're kind of talking about the complete opposite to WoW Classic, where you kind of have to play with people to get stuff done. Old Republic's big thing was that you can play the entire game single player.
That's right, and you get things like or characters like companions who do go along with you on your quests, and it gives you that sense that you're not just on your own. And having everything fully voice acted with cutscenes, you really don't feel like you're playing an MMO sometimes when you're going through the missions, because everything's put out in front of you like it's watching a movie. Very similar to Knights of the Old Republic. I think it's still done by BioWare, the Old Republic. So it's got a similar sort of interface where you select dialogue options and talk to NPCs and get the lore. I find myself not skipping dialogue just to get quests done. I'm really interested in what's actually happening in the world. That's something that never really happened to me with WoW. Probably because I didn't really find the lore that interesting, like you said. And it is Star Wars. But having everything fully voice acted and not just written in front of you really, really pulls you into the game a lot more. And I'm really enjoying the level progression towards endgame now.
Yeah, the voice acting made a huge difference for me. Like you mentioned KOTOR before, you definitely can get that vibe when you're playing Old Republic, that this is like it's not as good as KOTOR, but that it could be KOTOR 3. Like you can play the game and you get cutscenes, you get choices to make, and they have consequences. And I've definitely found myself digging into the lore a lot. Like you said, partially that's because it's Star Wars, but I would kind of really take my time in each zone when I was playing Old Republic. I'd go and find all the lore objects, and I'd want to do all the quests and see how they played out. I really cared about that stuff in a way that I never have in WoW. Like I've never cared about the characters, really. It's more about it's more about just your character and how their skills level up and things like that.
I've got a question about MMOs in general. If you guys are happy to leave specifically the Old Republic for a moment, I was just wondering, like, you mentioned that the Old Republic is WoW for Star Wars, and outside of the Old Republic and WoW, I don't feel like there's like any really great MMO RPG that everybody kind of like agrees on being a good example of the genre. Like, there's heaps of kind of like the free to play clones of WoW, I think. Like, in some ways, we got like the Neverwinter stuff, and there's ones that I'm forgetting the names for now. I've tried a few of them, and they never hold my attention because it's just all WoW. It's not quite as good. But I'm wondering, like, of what is existing and popular now, like, would you count like Destiny as an MMO? Like, it's kind of not quite the same thing as what WoW is. And if not, what defines an MMO? Like, are there other examples that are still kicking?
Like, to answer that first, I think yes, I would say Destiny's an MMO. I haven't played it, but from
Mhm.
everything I've heard, it sounds like it would be an MMO. I think to be an MMO for me, one of the things is it kind of has to be a persistent online world. Like an online
Mm.
game that you just always play online is not necessarily an MMO if the world is not persistent. Um, in terms of things that are still running, the first one that comes to mind is EVE Online. That is probably the best example, I
Ah,
think. I think that's probably the best MMO I've ever played, and I think it's the best realization of the genre because so much of the game is entirely in the control of players. It is kind of the ultimate sandbox game, and that is still going. It runs at a very low player base compared to some of these other games. I'm not sure exactly what, maybe like less than 200,000 people or something like that. It's quite a small amount, but it's been ticking over quite well for many years now. I think the other one that comes up a lot when people talk about modern MMOs, which have kind of done things, moved on from WoW and done things differently, would be Guild Wars 2, which I also played. Which Guild Wars 2 did some really interesting stuff with kind of giving the player a lot more freedom. So everything in the game is kind of scaled to your level. So you just go wherever you want to go and you can play there. It got rid of the kind of quest system of traditional MMOs, and basically you just you just go into a zone, and anything you do in the zone with other players kind of counts towards bigger objectives that you're constantly working towards. So you don't really have to group up with people to do things. You just play. And if other people are there, you're all working together. And so those are probably the two that I think of that I have played that are still quite successful.
so I have a follow-up question about Destiny and defining the persistent world
Hmm.
because um, in all of the Destiny worlds, until like an expansion comes out or something changes, all of the worlds just kind of keep resetting. Like the same types of bad guys will always keep respawning in the same area. And you can go and get bounties from like the NPC in that area, but you they'll expire after 24 hours, and you can go and get the same one. Maybe it's a different weapon you have to use the next week, and like there's the same raids and the same strikes, and every like week or so, maybe they refresh that it's now a different kind of challenge that you're doing, but it's not like there's a marketplace. Like it's not like you can trade items between like players.
Mm.
Um, like you can use TeamSpeak to talk while you're playing, but there's not like anything in game where you would communicate if you didn't have someone added as a friend on PlayStation. I mean,
I
when you're on a fire team, you can hear each other, but you're never changing the world. Like it might change because of the narrative, and maybe another expansion comes out. And so, like for example, when Shadowkeep comes out, we're going back to the moon, which hasn't been a playable space since Destiny 1. But and it is persistent. There are always people in there, and you'll jump into the world, and you might see someone that you know. But like, it's not like you're affecting anything.
the thing that I to answer that question, Timmy, I think the thing that sets Destiny and games like it, another game similar to Destiny, is Borderlands. Actually, really, even though it's four-player co-op.
Well, I
Um,
think Borderlands shares a lot in common with Destiny in terms of what
Yes.
their multiplayer is.
That what really sets it apart from probably other MMOs is that Destiny is largely instanced. So you have a certain mission or part of the world that is run only by your team in that moment, but then it resets and it's not necessarily affecting a larger portion of the world. So it's kind of like Borderlands in the sense that it's got a lot of instancing in it.
Right.
Other MMOs do as well, but there's no overarching persistent world.
Right. I think
that's where it is.
Destiny has hubs that are persistent, right? So there's like an area you go where you can see all the other players.
Yeah, so you have the tower, which is kind of like your home base, or the farm if you're in a different part of the game. And again, you can see other players on the planet and stuff, but I mean, just like the same events will keep popping up, and
that's
like
that's normal though. I think like that's how WoW works. It's like the world is persistent, and like JT said, you have instance content in WoW, but it's kind of the smaller proportion of the game, whereas the vast majority of it is one open world that everyone shares. And the same monsters respawn, everyone's doing the same quests, like nothing changes until basically Blizzard decide they're going to release a new update and things change. So that's, I think in some ways, I think maybe Destiny 2 it's just a bit smaller. You know, it's like all the same concepts I think are at play. It's just like the huge, big, persistent world maybe isn't as big, and yeah. But I'd still call it an MMO. I think it still has those kind of fundamental things. In contrast to something like Borderlands, which I think, you can't play Destiny.
Definitely not an MMO.
You can't play Destiny as a single player game. Like you said, Timmy, you have to go back to the tower at some point, and there are other players there. Like Borderlands, you opt into multiplayer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. True. Sorry, I was just going to say, to be clear, I wasn't advocating that it is or it isn't. I just have less familiarity with MMOs, so I was wondering what is the defining characteristics for you guys.
Another interesting one that I would probably add is PlanetSide 2 is still very, very popular. I've played it and I absolutely love it. As far as first person MMOs go, it is excellent. It's the only experience I've had where I really truly feel like I am in a very, very large power struggle because it is only PvP. But for an example, there was one time where I was actually in part of a over 900 player battle, so hundreds of people on each side, that was tearing across an entire continent. And it was huge. You see everything happen and people contesting for different points and resources, and you always feel like there's a lot at stake for your side. So that's another one I'd probably throw in there as far as, having the defining characteristics of an MMO, where the world is always changing as a result of what the players do.
Yeah, I played a bit of PlanetSide 2 with you, JT, I think very early on. I think you got a few of us into that for like only a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember the kind of like, it was sort of, I remember it just being this like enormous open world, and there was sort of like, you'd have a huge, huge map, and there might be like 4 or 5 very big battles going on across this map, and you could kind of run across or fly across or drive across or something to the different battles, which was quite cool. It didn't really stick with me, but I do remember playing it a little bit.
Yeah.
The other one that I was going to mention in terms of, well, just kind of because you said, Timmy, how like it's a persistent world, but things don't change. Just to mention Eve again, as I still think the best example of where players do change it. The way Eve works is that it basically has maybe 25% of the territory in the game is called high security, and it means that it is basically under the control of AI. And, the developers can kind of maintain order there, and then probably 75% of the world it's called null security, and it is basically a blank slate entirely for players. So player-run empires can take control of different star systems there, and then once they take control of them, it is completely up to them what they do. So they can establish their own kind of code of conduct, their own kind of rules about how things work. They can establish their own like security services run by players, and the variety of things that people do is pretty ridiculous in that. Like when I played, I was part of a alliance of corporations who kind of operated on quite a friendly basis. So their rule was that if something is not hostile to you, like another player, you don't shoot it. You only shoot at things if they are hostile. Whereas there are huge areas of player controlled space where their philosophy is basically if you are not allied with them, they will shoot you. So if anyone goes in there, they will just kill them straight away. And it was really interesting playing as part of that ecosystem because at one point we had a large alliance of those kind of more hostile people who decided that the philosophy of our region of space went against what they believed Eve should be. So they were going to basically wipe us off the map because they believed that Eve should be more chaotic and violent. So they wanted to get rid of this alliance who believed that you should be friendly first and, shoot later. And that war started because of that. Like it started because they disagreed with the way that our corporations played the game. And that was pretty cool.
That honestly sounds incredible to me.
That sounds like it might be the only instance of an MMO where a literal ideology permeated the game mechanics and actually changed the way people play the game. That there's no room for that to happen in most other MMOs.
No. Like there's a reason that the player base is small because it's like it's pretty hardcore. Like to be honest, like I don't play it anymore. It's too much. Like it requires too much time investment to play. But it really was amazing, and even the sort of the territory of the game is kind of divided up into different regions like this. So there is an area of the game that is considered like Russian space, and it's like this is where the Russian alliances have set up all their empires. Everyone there speaks in Russian, and so if you fly into those areas, if they don't shoot you, like all of the chat will be in Russian. And so if you don't speak that, you can't get much done there. And then there's a whole nother area which is German space, and it's the same thing there. And that's where those players play. It's not like JT, you talked about instancing. Nothing is instanced in Eve. That's part of their big selling point, is that everyone is in the same world, and they have to find a way to get along or find a way to not get along, really.
High stakes.
Yeah. Also super punishing. If you lose your ships in Eve, you just lose them. You don't respawn and get it back. You've got to kind of work your way back up again, which I've had some funny moments with friends playing who couldn't adapt so well to that philosophy. You have to be ready to lose your ship.
One of the only games where you actually can purchase insurance, right?
Yeah, you can purchase insurance for your ships.
And if I wanted to, if I was playing that game and I amassed a small fortune, could I create my own insurance company and start providing that insurance to other players?
Yeah, you could. Like the insurance in the game is kind of it's like an AI system. So you pay insurance and then it pays you back it's complicated, but it pays you kind of the base cost of your ship without upgrades is what you get back. Okay. But there are things like that. So there are player-run systems exactly like what you say. There were banks set up in Eve where people would earn interest on money that they deposited. A lot of corporations have their own insurance system. So they basically say, if you join our corporation, don't use the in-game insurance. We have our own in-house insurance where we fund your ship replacements. The idea being that they give you more money back for your ships because you help them to do things and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff like that. There was actually, quite famously for a long time, there was an Eve lottery that was being run. And there was like a guy who, you would send a certain amount of credits to each week, and he would like randomly draw the winner, and they would get like billions of credits. And it's kind of ridiculous, and you probably have to give credit to the developers, CCP Games, for just allowing players the freedom to do everything. Like their big thing is being very hands off.
It's interesting. You reminded me of something when talking about the persistent world and the policy of not attacking people unless you were attacked, etc., etc.
Hmm.
Because it actually reminded me of a couple of mobile games that I was playing, which that I didn't think of them straight away when you think MMOs, but they're ticking all the boxes because it kind of started out as one of those, you like kind of like an Age of Empires look to it, like top down. You're building and you're moving through the ages. So you start in like the Stone Age and you work to the Bronze Age or the Feudal Age or whatever it might be, and you make clans and stuff. But that world is definitely persistent because you know how those mobile games will often have you like it'll take a legitimate 12 hours to upgrade, your barracks to the next level or whatever, or to research what you need to be able to move into the next age.
Hmm.
And I was playing one of these games and I got into like this clan with the people around me and they had all sorts of like rules and stuff. Like there was this one guy that was like right near me, and he was like literally the only other like player in our area that wasn't part of our clan. And you can see how much experience people have got from combat, and everybody had stacks. So I just assumed, all right, well I'm gonna start earning my chops and take out this guy. And the entire clan freaked out at me. They're like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, did he attack you?" I was like, "Nah," but he's like mining our resources, and they're like, "Nah, dude." And you know, it was really hard for me because they were all overseas players. So like, whenever they were getting ready to go and rumble with some other dudes, I was sleeping, so I was missing out on a lot of this stuff. But it was always running. Like they were like constantly in our little message board thing in the app, being like, we need to see that you are contributing at least this much stuff, or you're going to get booted from the clan. Everyone needs
Mm.
to be contributing. We need to see your involvement in raids and stuff. And like, it got to the point I stopped playing because it just was not fun because these guys were so full on,
Yeah.
right? And they were all like, we need to do this because we're about to get to the third level of the map. Like it was actually so expansive for what started off as a little, you know, collect your wood, build your hut. Now you can, have more citizens, and that means, you're going to need more food. So now you're going to have to send people out of your town to do that. And it started off like a little Age of Empires thing, and then it ended up like so stressful, so much pressure that I was just like, I'm done with this.
That does sound
But
like an
yeah,
MMO
like
though.
yes,
Yes.
exactly. That's what I mean. And I kind of like I didn't even realize that they have, by all accounts, kind of properly made the jump to mobile. Because you think about an MMO and you go, that's never going to be a rewarding experience on a mobile. And it certainly wasn't for me. But a lot of these guys were on the like their fourth kind of starting from scratches. Like that's why they were like, we're going to hit this level soon because we know what we're doing.
Yeah, I guess when I think of MMOs, I tend to think of PC more so because it's kind of like, I guess it tends to be the platform where a lot of that real niche stuff can find an audience. But yeah, what you are describing, that's an MMO.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. Like, and there are so many games like this. Like, I played this particular one, but it's not the only one I've played on mobile.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that these little games that, like, at glance look like it's just Clash of Clans or whatever, like they're proper full time running MMOs to some extent.
I've got a question for you, Timmy, as the person who hasn't played many MMOs
Hmm.
in our podcast. What is the MMO that would get you interested? Is it like a thematic thing? If someone had I don't know, a Witcher MMO, does that get you interested, or is it like a certain kind of genre? Like, what would get you to give something a go like that?
I'm not sure. I played a little bit of WoW, like way back in the day, and I think like I didn't have or didn't know a lot of people that were playing it. Like now that I mentioned in previous episodes that the reason I'm really enjoying Destiny 2 is because I'm playing with my girlfriend and with a couple of other mates from work and stuff, and it's a lot more fun having people in there to do it with. So I guess my barrier to trying an MMO is a lot lower now that I've kind of been enjoying doing that.
Hmm.
I guess another barrier or obstacle for me is that a lot of like the big ones like WoW and like the Old Republic are very much PC based. And I don't have a gaming PC. I do all of mine on my PlayStation. That's where I do most of my gaming. I have a Switch as well, but the PlayStation is where most of it happens. So I'm not sure. Like, I don't look at WoW and go, nah, that's not the world for me. Because, I like fantasy games. I'll give them a crack. And, like, Eve sounds great, but like you said, it sounds really hardcore. So I think it would need to be a perfect storm of me having the requisite equipment, me getting into something perhaps like not necessarily right at the ground level, but early on. Because you know how, like, a lot of the ones that have been running for a long time now, if I wanted to get into WoW, it'd probably be like get the latest expansion, which is going to give me like a boost to a level that's going to mean I can do stuff with other people. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I could get something that perhaps I'm not going to feel overwhelmed straight away.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think like WoW does a really good job, I think, with each expansion if you wanted
mhm,
to start fresh. But I think I know what you mean though. There is something enjoyable actually about just being in at the start. Like being
yeah,
in when you're finding everything out and when everyone's learning about an MMO. That's probably something we haven't mentioned. It's one of the things I think which is like best about an MMO is playing it at launch when no
yeah,
one knows what the hell they're doing is so much fun. And someone being like, oh, did you know over here around this corner there's, a box and in it there's a cool sword? Or,
yeah,
if you go to this place you can get a special quest here. Like once it gets to the point where everyone knows everything and
hmm
then it gets to the point where, you're a noob if you don't know like the perfect way to do every single thing in the game. Yeah, it's less
yeah,
fun.
yeah. When everybody just kind of like expects you to know the perfect min max to get whatever loot drop you're aiming for or whatever, like it takes a bit of the thrill out of it.
Exactly, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Like, of course, like I'm not saying like I only want to play one when I'm running around like a headless chook and like getting lucky, but working things out for yourself certainly holds some of the thrill, I think. Um, but yeah, so I don't know that there's like a one single thing that's going to get me into it. You know that I've rallied against a lot of multiplayer stuff because I'm so much more about the narrative side of things. Um, but you know, I think it's doing a disservice to a lot of MMOs saying like they're lacking for narrative. It's just haven't found the one that's like caught me straight away yet.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why I was interested because yeah, you tend to be more the single player guy. It will be interesting though. Like, um, Destiny feels like I could be wrong here. Write in and tell me if I'm wrong. Destiny feels like the first real big console MMO to kind of really kind of
It's
put down roots in this way,
I
and
think
so
it's I think it's the first one to do an MMO on console and get it right as far as keeping the community engaged. I
right,
suppose.
right, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes because I think we might have discussed before, it's now like Bungie have kind of got ownership and full
Mm.
control of it back, so that's promising.
Yeah.
It's actually going free to play at the start of October, and I am going to be tempted to give it a bit of a whirl. But
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see where it goes, to see whether that inspires, whether there are currently some console MMOs in development that will shake things up. So we will watch that closely. But for today, that is about all the games that we're going to be talking about. But as we usually do, I want to ask you guys, what things are you planning to play before we next gather for the podcast? JT?
It's likely I will only be playing more the Old Republic because I did actually subscribe today. So I'm no longer a free to play noob.
Oh, that's how they get
So
you.
I get all the benefits. That is how they get. Yeah, and they got me. They got me good. Um, so that's probably all I'll be jumping into. I'm also away into state for the next couple of weeks. So I won't be able to get too much gaming done, but that's probably what I'll be doing. What about you, Paul?
Well, besides more WoW Classic, I have been playing South Park: The Fractured But Whole. Didn't talk about it today because
The fractured what? Sorry.
definitely made that joke before. The Fractured But Whole. Um, I have been playing it. Didn't want to talk about it this episode because I probably want to try and finish it up so I can talk about it as a whole thing. So I'll be playing a lot more of that. And I'm also hoping to introduce some new people to a Disc and Dice favorite, which is Avalon. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, yeah. So hoping to get in a little bit of tabletop gaming. Nothing new, but just some of the old classics. So we might talk about how that goes next episode. Timmy, what have you got on your gaming plate?
Just before I answer that, I just want to make sure JT is aware that we made that exact joke on the very first episode of this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't listen.
Yeah, probably for the best. Paul went back recently to have a bit of a suss
man.
because he's playing the same game, and he didn't have many kind things to say about our podcasting prowess. So thank you for sticking with us. If you listened to that one and you're still here,
anyone who listened at the start and wasn't just a real life friend of ours and is still listening, we appreciate it.
Even if you were a real life friend of ours and you still are and you're still listening, good on you. But look, I last time you guys asked me what I was going to be playing, I mentioned Control because it's by the Alan Wake guys. I picked that up today, and so there's a very real chance I'm going to be playing it within the hour. I'm so excited for it.
Keen to hear about it too.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys will be hearing about this on the next podcast for sure. I don't expect it to be like heaps long, so hopefully I can like knock out most of it. But yeah, again, kind of Alan Wake. It's apparently kind of set in the same world as that game, which makes me so excited. Like not in a big way, just kind of like a couple of references, which I am a sucker for. I like a connected universe, especially if it's not like overt and in your face, just like a little reward for knowing your shit. But apart from that, I'm really keen to play Villainous again. I want to try out some of the other villains, and I came painfully close to buying one of those Keyforge expansions we mentioned last episode. So there's a very real chance I'll get tipped over the edge. And if I don't, Shadowkeep, the next expansion for Destiny 2, is going to drop probably just as this next episode gets recorded. So I might just get into some of that. Who knows? If not, it'll be the episode after.
Hey, you hold off on that Keyforge expansion for about 3 weeks, and then we will do that in person.
Oh, be still my beating heart. Paul, you're coming back.
All right. Well, that is it for Disc and Dice for this episode. The first of our fortnightly episodes. Bear with us as we perhaps iron out the wrinkles of fitting things into a shorter format and kind of changing some things about to see how it's best to go about doing this. But if you like what you hear, you can always subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app of choice. We do appreciate that. Also, if you rate and review the podcast on usually on iTunes, that's always helpful for us. If you want to get in touch, discanddice@gmail.com. If you have a question you want to ask us, if you've got a friend who's made an indie game that's going to be at PAX and you want us to check it out, anything like that, do get in touch and let us know. And if you want to follow the pod on the various social medias, we're on Facebook, facebook.com/discanddice, and you can follow us on Twitter. We are @discanddice.
Yeah, now's the time to get in touch. You're not going to have to wait a whole month to see if we respond to get emails now. So let us know what you want us to talk about. And you're going to have a much quicker turnaround.
Exactly. All right. Well, JT, thank you for joining us.
As always, we'll see you next time.
And Timmy, thank you as usual.
Thank you. I will hear you next time.
We will hear all of each other's next time when we gather to talk about some video games.
Video games. And games.